The human soldier saved the royal daughters. Their repayment left him speechless. Pain dragged Jacob Torres back to consciousness like hooks in his flesh. His first breath brought the taste of blood and smoke. His second brought clarity. The transport was destroyed, the squad was gone, and he was alive when he had no right to be. Metal groaned somewhere above him. The acrid smell of burning electronics mixed with something worse, flesh and fuel, the signature of an ambush gone exactly as planned. His ribs screamed when he moved, each breath a separate negotiation with his body. Concussion symptoms flickered at the edges of his awareness. Nausea, doubled vision, the sense that gravity had shifted 15 degrees left. His rifle lay 3 feet away, half buried in debris. Jacob dragged himself toward it, ignoring the warm wetness spreading down his left side. Training overrode pain, overrode the animal part of his brain that wanted to curl up and wait for the end. Marines don't die lying down. He'd heard Sergeant Okoye say that 1,000 times. Okoye was definitely dead now. Jacob had seen her body in the front seat, or what remained of it. He gripped the rifle, checked the magazine by touch. 14 rounds, enough to make someone regret finding him. The canyon walls rose on either side, rust-colored stone carved by millennia of wind. Kishar Ford's twin suns blazed overhead, turning the air into something visible, something that pressed down with physical weight. Jacob's vision swam. He focused on his breathing, counted to 4 on the inhale, held, released. The dizziness receded enough for him to stand. Every part of him hurt, but the hurt meant he was functional. He'd fought through worse. Weapons fire echoed from deeper in the canyon, not the sharp crack of human firearms, but something else. Energy discharge, maybe plasma-based. Jacob moved toward the sound before conscious thought could interfere. His body knew what to do: stay low, use cover, assess the threat. The canyon narrowed ahead, rock formations providing concealment as the sounds of combat grew louder. Voices shouted in a language he didn't speak, musical and harsh at once. He crested a ridge and froze. 2 figures fought in the canyon below, surrounded by at least a dozen attackers in mismatched armor. The defenders moved like nothing Jacob had ever seen, fluid and lethal, their strikes precise enough to be beautiful if they weren't so efficient at ending lives. Their armor caught the light in ways that seemed wrong for metal, organic curves over obviously feminine forms. One stood slightly taller than the other, her movements controlled and devastating. The shorter one fought with less refinement but equal ferocity, protecting her companion's flank. Blue skin. Jacob's brain supplied the detail with clinical detachment. The taller one had deep blue skin that seemed to glow faintly in the harsh sunlight. Her companion's skin was paler, lavender pink. Both had hair in colors that didn't exist in human genetics. Vivid pink-purple on the taller one, platinum blonde on the other. Valrin. The word came with a flood of briefing materials Jacob had skimmed weeks ago. The empire that controlled this sector, the species humanity was trying very hard not to piss off. He spotted the insignia on their armor, golden serpents coiled around stylized suns, royal house markings. The rebels were closing in, trying to overwhelm through numbers. They wanted the Valrin alive. Jacob could tell from how they fought, going for limbs instead of kill shots. Capture, not execution, which meant these two were valuable, which meant someone would pay dearly if they died here. Jacob assessed the canyon walls with a tactician's eye. Unstable sedimentary rock, stress fractures visible even from this distance. The rebels had set up in the worst possible position, confident in their numbers. Amateurs. He spotted their equipment cache 30 meters down, charges they'd used to disable his transport, stacked carelessly against the canyon face. He had maybe 2 minutes before the Valrin were overwhelmed. Jacob moved. The descent nearly killed him. His ribs ground together with each movement, and twice he had to stop when his vision white out from pain. But he made it to the rebel position, staying low behind an outcropping, while their attention remained fixed on their prizes. The charges were military grade, probably stolen from a colonial armory. Jacob's hands worked automatically, muscle memory from 100 demolition drills. Set the timer. 30 seconds. Place it against the fault line he'd spotted. Arm it. He ran. The explosion hammered through the canyon like the fist of an angry god. Rockface collapsed in a thundering avalanche that buried half the rebel force instantly. The survivors scattered, their formation breaking. Jacob dropped to one knee and opened fire, 3 round bursts that dropped the nearest rebels before they understood where the attack was coming from. His rifle kicked against his shoulder, steady, reliable, almost comforting in its familiarity. The blue-skinned Valryn moved the instant the chaos started. She flowed through the disrupted rebel line like water through cracks, her blade finding throats and joints with surgical efficiency. The younger one followed, less graceful but equally effective. They were carving through the survivors, and Jacob kept firing to keep the rebels from regrouping. His magazine ran dry. He dropped it, reached for another, found nothing. 14 rounds, all gone. He'd bought him maybe 45 seconds. The rebel commander, a scarred human in salvaged armor, raised his weapon toward the blue Valryn's back. Jacob threw his empty rifle. It hit the man's arm, spoiling his aim, and the shot went wide. The Valryn spun, saw the threat, closed the distance in 3 impossible strides. Her blade took the commander under the chin, angled up through the brainstem. He dropped like a puppet with cut strings. She turned to face Jacob, amber eyes blazing with intensity that made his breath catch. Up close, she was stunning in a way that had nothing to do with attraction and everything to do with presence, like staring at a predator and recognizing something fundamental about the food chain. Her armor was scored and dented, dark blood, Valryn blood, he assumed, leaking from a gash in her side. She studied him with the same assessing gaze he'd used on the canyon walls, cataloging his wounds, his empty hands, the fact that he was swaying on his feet. Jacob tried to speak, his vision tunneled. The last thing he felt was her catching him before he hit the ground, her skin cool against his fevered face, her voice saying something in that musical language he couldn't understand. Then the darkness took him, and he fell into it, grateful that at least he died doing something that mattered. Consciousness returned in fragments, white ceiling, soft sheets, the steady pulse of medical monitors. Jacob's body felt distant, wrapped in something that dulled the edges of pain without eliminating it entirely. He tried to catalog his injuries by sensation, ribs taped, left side bandaged, head cushioned carefully. His throat was dry. When he attempted to move, his muscles protested with the weakness of enforced rest. Someone sat beside his bed. Jacob turned his head slowly, fighting the medications that wanted to drag him back under. The chair held a figure in dark armor, segments catching the sterile light, blue skin, amber eyes that watched him with an intensity that made him wonder if he was still dreaming. She sat with perfect posture, spine straight, hands folded in her lap. Her pink-purple hair fell over one shoulder in waves that seemed too vibrant to be real. Princess Salira. His brain supplied the connection through the fog, the one he'd saved, the one who'd caught him. He tried to salute. Training insisted, even if his body couldn't cooperate. His right hand barely cleared the sheets before her fingers wrapped around his wrist, stopping the motion with gentle firmness. Her skin was smooth, cooler than human touch, and the contact sent clarity through him like cold water. "Do not," she said, her accent precise and controlled, each English word carefully shaped. "You have earned something far more significant than military courtesy." Her voice had depth to it, resonant in a way that suggested differences in vocal anatomy. Jacob let his hand fall back to the sheets. She released him but didn't retreat, studying his face with the same assessing gaze she'd used in the canyon. This close, he could see details. The way light caught the faint luminescence of her skin, the gold flecks in her amber irises, the sharp elegance of her features. "How long?" His voice came out rougher than intended. 3 days. Your injuries were extensive. The medics said humans are remarkably fragile compared to most species. Something shifted in her expression, too subtle to read. "Yet you fought while half dead. This troubles me." Jacob almost laughed, but his ribs reminded him that was a bad idea. Marines don't die lying down. "I do not understand this phrase. Means we're too stubborn to quit." He met her eyes, saw intelligence there alongside the scrutiny. "Your sister?" "Talia is well. She insisted we bring you here. She invoked life debt before I could process what had occurred." Salira leaned forward slightly, her armor whispering with the movement. In Valran culture, when one saves the life of another, particularly royalty, a bond is created that cannot be dismissed. You placed yourself between my sister and death. You fought for us while your body was failing. This creates obligation. Jacob's chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with his injuries. I didn't do it for obligation. Your people were in trouble. That's enough. Yes, her amber eyes held his. That is precisely what troubles me. Before he could parse that statement, the door opened. A human woman entered, middle-aged with graying hair pulled back severely, sharp green eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She wore a dark suit that screamed diplomat, and she assessed the room with practiced efficiency before nodding to Celira. Your Highness, Lieutenant Torres. She pulled a chair closer, sat with the confidence of someone used to high-stakes negotiations. I'm Kether Wren, Colonial Diplomatic Corps. We need to talk about your situation. Celira stood smoothly. I will return this evening. Rest, Lieutenant. We have much to discuss. She left with that same fluid grace Jacob remembered from the canyon, and suddenly the room felt larger and emptier. Kether waited until the door closed. You've become a political complication, Lieutenant. Half the Valran court thinks you're a hero. The other half thinks you're either a spy or an opportunist who manufactured the situation to infiltrate the royal family. That's insane. That's politics. She pulled out a tablet, scrolled through information. The life debt is real. Celira can't dismiss it without dishonoring herself and her house. But keeping you here means dealing with factions who view humans as clever scavengers at best, dangerous manipulators at worst. You'll be presented at court tomorrow. Commander Vrask will almost certainly challenge your motives publicly. Who's Vrask? Head of the Imperial Guard. Traditional, suspicious, convinced humans are inferior. He'll try to provoke you into saying something stupid or aggressive. Kether fixed him with a look that reminded him of drill instructors. Your survival depends on navigating social dynamics you barely understand. Stay calm, stay humble, and for God's sake, don't try to be a hero again. Jacob spent the next 18 hours learning Valran protocol from Kether, physical therapy with medics who seemed fascinated by human physiology, and trying not to think about amber eyes watching him while he slept. The court presentation loomed like an execution. The throne room was massive, all soaring architecture and metallic surfaces that caught light in hypnotic patterns. Valran courtiers filled the space, blues and grays and silvers, a few with skin tones closer to purple or green. All of them tall, elegant, watching him with expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. Jacob wore dress fatigues that felt absurdly plain in this environment, and every step reminded him his ribs weren't fully healed. Celira stood beside the throne where an older female Valran sat, the Empress, clearly, her dark indigo skin marked with silver patterns, and her presence filling the room like gravity. Celira wore formal armor that was more art than protection, her hair elaborately styled. She didn't look at him, which somehow felt worse than scrutiny. A massive Valran male stepped forward, charcoal gray skin marked with darker striations, cold silver eyes locked on Jacob. Commander Vrask. This human claims he saved Her Highness and Princess Talia from rebel forces. Vrask's voice carried through the chamber like thunder. I question whether his actions were truly heroic or merely opportunistic. Perhaps he was part of the ambush, turning on his fellow conspirators to gain royal favor. Silence fell. Every eye turned to Jacob. He could feel the weight of expectation, the court waiting to see how the fragile human would respond to challenge. Jacob met Vrask's gaze. I was part of a transport convoy that got ambushed. My entire squad died. I heard weapons fire and investigated. 2 people were surrounded by hostiles trying to capture them. I had about 30 seconds to decide what to do. He paused, letting the words settle. Didn't know they were royalty until I saw the armor up close. Didn't particularly care. Someone needed help. I had a rifle and some charges. The math was simple. Simple. Vrask's tone dripped contempt. You expect us to believe you risked your life without thought of reward? I expect you to believe whatever you want, Commander. I was there. You weren't. The people I saved know what happened. That's enough for me. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Celira's expression remained controlled, but something flickered in her amber eyes. A approval, maybe, or recognition. The Empress raised one hand. Silence fell instantly. The life debt stands. Lieutenant Torres will remain under royal protection until the debt is satisfied. Her golden eyes fixed on Jacob with penetrating intensity. We will determine the truth of these events. Until then, you are a guest of this court. The formal presentation ended. Courtiers dispersed into smaller conversations, and Jacob found himself alone near a column, trying to process what had just happened. Celira appeared beside him with that unnerving grace, close enough that he caught her scent, something like ozone and flowers. You handled Vrask well. Many would have responded with anger. She tilted her head slightly, studying him. Why didn't you? He's doing his job, protecting you from potential threats. Can't fault him for that. You are remarkably difficult to categorize, Lieutenant Torres. Her voice carried something he couldn't identify. This is unsettling. Over the following days, Celira began what she called cultural education, teaching him Valoran customs, social hierarchies, the complex web of honor that governed her people. They met in palace gardens, in quiet libraries, places where conversation felt less formal. Jacob learned that Valoran valued strength and nobility above all, that emotions were considered weakness in public, that her entire life had been shaped by duty to her empire. He told her about Earth colonies, about growing up on a frontier world where survival meant cooperation and adaptability, about losing friends in combat and the weight that never quite left afterward, about how military structure gave him purpose when nothing else made sense. You carry guilt for those who died, she said one afternoon, amber eyes too perceptive, even though you could not have saved them. Doesn't mean I shouldn't have tried harder. This is illogical. Feelings usually are. Jacob met her gaze. You telling me Valoran don't have regrets? Something crossed her face, pain quickly suppressed. We are taught to master such things. To let emotion rule us is to show weakness. That sounds exhausting. Her laugh surprised them both, musical and unguarded. She covered her mouth immediately, glancing around as if afraid someone had witnessed the lapse. Jacob found himself smiling despite everything, and the moment stretched between them like something physical. The garden attack came without warning, an assassin dropping from an overhang, blade aimed for Jacob's spine. He twisted on instinct, but Celira moved faster. She was suddenly there, intercepting the strike, her own blade taking the attacker through the throat in one fluid motion. The assassin dropped, choking, and Celira stood over the body with murder in her eyes. Jacob grabbed her arm before she could strike again. He's done. It's over. She turned on him, breathing hard, pupils dilated. For a moment he thought she might attack him too. Then recognition flooded her expression, followed by something that looked like horror. She was shaking. You are unharmed? Her voice was tight, barely controlled. I'm fine. You got here in time. If I had been slower... She cut herself off, amber eyes searching his face with desperate intensity. You should not have been in danger. This is unacceptable. Celira, he kept his voice gentle, aware that something had shifted. I'm okay. Her hands found his shoulders, gripping hard enough to bruise. Then she seemed to realize what she was doing and released him, stepping back. Blood stained her arms from the kill, both the assassin's and her own from a defensive wound. Jacob moved without thinking, pulling cloth from his uniform to wrap around the gash on her forearm. His touch was steady despite everything. Celira watched him work with an expression he couldn't read, her breathing gradually slowing. The contact felt intimate beyond its necessity, his human hands gentle against her blue skin, her pulse visible beneath the luminescent surface. When he finished securing the cloth, neither of them moved. His fingers rested against her wrist. Her amber eyes held his. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For stopping me, I would have lost control. That cannot happen. You were scared. That's not weakness, that's caring. She pulled away then, but not before he saw the conflict in her expression. Desire warring with discipline, need fighting duty. Talia appeared later that evening in Celira's private chambers, her violet blue eyes bright with determination. You need to admit how you feel about him. I do not know what you mean. Everyone except you can see it, sister. The way you look at him, how you found excuses to visit his room while he recovered, how you watch him when he's not looking. Talia moved closer, her voice softening. He makes you laugh. When was the last time that happened? It is irrelevant. My duty is to the Empire, to our family. Personal feelings cannot. Cannot what? Make you happy? Give you something beyond responsibility? Talia took her sister's hands. You saved him today like the world would end if he died. That is not duty. That is something else. Celira pulled away, moving to the window overlooking the city. The denial forming in her throat felt hollow even before she spoke it. The next morning, Councillor Sethran requested an emergency session of the Royal Council. He presented documentation, communications, financial records, tactical reports, all suggesting that Jacob's squad had been deliberately sent into the ambush by human colonial command as part of a larger conspiracy to infiltrate the royal family through manufactured heroism. The evidence looked damning. Celira studied it with growing dread, knowing she should believe it, that political reality demanded caution. But every instinct screamed that this was false, that Jacob's grief and guilt were too real to be fabricated. The Empress's voice cut through the deliberations. Princess Celira, you will order Lieutenant Torres confined to guarded quarters pending full investigation. No contact until this matter is resolved. Celira met her mother's golden eyes and saw no mercy there, only the cold calculation of power and survival. She thought of Jacob's face when he'd told her about losing his squad, the raw honesty he'd shown when admitting his fears, the way he'd looked at her in the garden like she was something precious rather than political. As you command, Your Majesty, she said, and hated herself for how steady her voice sounded. The guarded quarters were comfortable in the way prisons could be. Soft furniture, wide windows, entertainment systems Jacob ignored. 2 guards stood outside at all times, their presence a constant reminder that he was contained, suspected, reduced to a problem requiring solution. Jacob sat on the edge of the bed and stared at his hands, the same hands that had set charges in the canyon, that had wrapped cloth around Celira's wounded arm. He'd thought maybe he'd found something here. Purpose, connection, the dangerous beginning of hope. He should have known better. The guilt he'd been fighting since the ambush came roaring back. His squad was dead because he'd survived. Celira thought he was part of some conspiracy. Everything he touched turned to ash. Maybe Vrask was right. Maybe humans were just clever opportunists, and Jacob was the worst kind because he'd almost believed his own performance. Days blurred together. Kether visited once, her expression carefully neutral. Jacob nodded and said nothing that mattered. Meals arrived on schedule. Guards changed shifts with mechanical precision. He went through physical therapy exercises, pushing until exhaustion offered temporary escape. At night, he replayed the garden, the way Celira had moved to protect him, the terror in her amber eyes when she'd gripped his shoulders, the feeling of her skin under his fingers, cool and smooth, the moment when neither had moved away, when the space between them had felt charged with something he hadn't wanted to name. He'd been an idiot to think it meant anything. Celira threw herself into investigation with the same intensity she brought to combat. She reviewed Sethran's evidence line by line, cross-referenced communications, interrogated officers. Inconsistencies emerged, timestamps that didn't align, authorization codes from officials who denied issuing them, financial transfers that dissolved into shell accounts. Political pressure mounted. Councillors opposed to human alliance used Jacob's confinement as proof of untrustworthiness. Vrask conducted his own parallel investigation, suspicion undiminished, but protocol absolute. The Empress watched everything, calculating advantages and losses in a game Celira was beginning to resent. She tried to focus on facts, on evidence, but at night, alone in her chambers, all she could see was Jacob's face when the guards had come for him. No anger, no protest, just resignation, as if he'd expected betrayal all along. That look haunted her. Talia found her staring at reports in the library 3 days into the confinement, dark circles under her eyes. You look terrible. Thank you. Celira turned back to her work. You should have seen his face when the guards came, like he'd been waiting his whole life for someone to confirm he was worthless. Celira's hands clenched. I had no choice. The Empress commanded. You chose duty over him. I understand why, but he doesn't, and it's destroying something in him that was barely holding together. The words hit like physical blows. Something cracked in Celira's chest, the careful control she'd maintained suddenly insufficient. I do not know how to fix this. Find the truth, clear his name, then go to him and tell him what you should have said in the garden. Kether arrived at Jacob's quarters on the 4th day, carrying a datapad. The ambush wasn't human conspiracy. Valrin rebels using stolen colonial weapons to frame your forces and prevent alliance negotiations. Sethran's evidence was fabricated. Your squad was targeted because the transport route took you near where they'd staged the attack on the princesses. Why tell me this? Because you're giving up, and that pisses me off. You saved 2 members of the royal family. You've handled impossible political pressure with more grace than trained diplomats, and you're sitting here convinced you deserve to be locked in a cage. Celira ordered me confined. Celira is fighting a political battle you don't see. She's been working 18-hour days trying to prove your innocence. She's miserable, Torres. That woman is tearing herself apart trying to protect you. The least you could do is help her finish this. Something shifted in Jacob's chest. Not quite hope, but close enough to hurt. What do you need? Think, you were there, you saw the rebel equipment, anything that didn't fit? Jacob closed his eyes, forcing himself back. The rebels' weapons had been uniform, same model, same configuration. Military-grade plasma rifles, the kind Valrin regulars carried, not improvised or stolen piecemeal. Their weapons were too standardized, like they came from a single supply depot. Kether's smile was sharp. That's useful. She left promising to follow that lead. Jacob remained at the window and allowed himself to believe that maybe this wasn't over. Celira's breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Vrask appeared in her office unannounced, placing a datapad on her desk. Sethran Valkorthi has connections to rebel factions, financial transfers hidden within legitimate trade accounts. The evidence against Torres is fabricated. Celira stared. You investigated independently. I protect the Empire. If Torres is a threat, I eliminate him. If he is not, then someone else is. He saved your life. Whatever my opinions of his species, that matters. Honor requires truth. Within hours, they'd assembled proof that couldn't be dismissed. Rebel connections, forged evidence, testimony from officers whose codes had been stolen. Sethran was arrested in his chambers. The Empress's judgment was swift. Life debt satisfied. Lieutenant Torres is cleared. Celira barely heard. She was already moving, leaving the council chamber at a pace that bordered on running. The guards at Jacob's quarters stepped aside, and she burst through the door with none of her usual composure. He stood on the balcony overlooking the city, silhouetted against afternoon light. His shoulders were hunched, head bowed. He didn't turn. Jacob, you are cleared. Sethran has been arrested. The evidence was fabricated. I should have believed you immediately. I am sorry. I understand why you did what you had to do. His voice was quiet, still facing away. You have responsibilities that matter more than one human's feelings. Somehow that made it worse. Celira moved closer. That does not make it right. I hurt you. I saw it in your eyes when the guards came, and I have seen it every moment since. You thought I had abandoned you. Hadn't you? The question landed like a blade. No, I fought for you. I tore apart Sethran's evidence. I worked with Vrask despite our differences. I barely slept because the thought of you believing I had betrayed you was unbearable. Her voice cracked. But I also failed you by not being stronger. By letting political pressure force me into actions that harmed someone Jacob turned. The look in his dark eyes stole her breath. Someone you what? Someone whose presence has become essential to me in ways I cannot explain. Since the canyon, you have challenged everything I believed about strength and duty. You make me laugh when I should be serious. You show vulnerability without shame. You see me as something other than a title. She took a breath that shook. Being near you is the first time I have felt like something beyond my role, and losing your trust, even briefly, was worse than any injury I have sustained. You ordered me locked away. Yes, and I will carry that failure. Celira moved closer, drawn by something stronger than protocol. But I fought for you every moment after. I will stand before the entire court and declare that you are worth more than their prejudices." Her hand lifted, hesitant, before settling against his scarred face. "I do not abandon those I care for. I do not abandon you." His hand covered hers, pressing her palm against his jaw. The contact sent heat through her veins. "I've been trying to convince myself I didn't care, that what I felt was just gratitude or displacement." His eyes searched hers. "But being near you is the first time since the ambush that I've felt like something other than a dead man still walking. You make me want to be worth saving." "You are worth saving. You have always been worth it. Even for a princess." "I am not asking as a princess." Her voice dropped to something raw. "I am asking as someone who cannot imagine my world without you in it anymore." Jacob's other hand found her waist, pulling her closer. "I stopped thinking of you as alien obligation weeks ago. Started thinking of you as the person I want to wake up next to." Their foreheads touched, breath mingling in the space between them. Celira's fingers traced the scar on his face. Jacob's hands spread across her back, feeling the segmented armor and the warmth beneath. Neither moved to kiss. Not yet. This moment felt too significant to rush, too fragile to risk breaking. "I do not want to hurt you again," Celira whispered. "I don't want to be someone who makes you choose between me and your duty." "Then we will find a way to make both possible." She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "No more running, no more assuming the worst. We face whatever comes together." "Together," he echoed, and the word felt like a promise. Intelligence confirmed rebel forces planned a major attack during the diplomatic summit, intending to kill both human and Valran leadership to prevent alliance. The briefing room fell silent as tactical projections showed multiple breach points designed to overwhelm palace defenses. Jacob studied the holographic display with focus that had kept him alive through a dozen combat zones. He saw the flaws immediately: predictable staging areas, reliance on chaos over precision. "They'll hit the east wing first, draw defenders away from the throne room, then breach here and here while response is fragmented. Classic diversion." Vrask stood across the table, silver eyes locked on Jacob. "What do you propose?" "Let them think the diversion is working. Reinforce the east wing, but keep your best units in reserve. When they commit to the throne room breach, hit them from positions they think are compromised. Trap them between defensive layers." Vrask's expression remained severe, but something shifted. "Tactically sound." He looked at the Empress. "Your Majesty, I recommend incorporating Lieutenant Taurus's analysis." The Empress's golden eyes moved to Jacob. "You have no official authority here, yet you volunteer to help defend those who recently imprisoned you. Why?" Jacob met her gaze. "Because the people I care about will be in that throne room. That's all the authority I need." She nodded once. "Commander Vrask, integrate Lieutenant Taurus into tactical command." The next hours blurred into organized chaos. Jacob worked alongside Vrask, translating human tactical doctrine into Valran framework. They didn't become friends. Vrask's distrust remained, but they developed functional respect. "Your species fights differently than ours." Vrask studied a positioning chart. "Less honor, more pragmatism. We call it adaptability. When you're outmatched, you get creative or you die." "Perhaps there is wisdom in that." Vrask's tone suggested the admission cost him. "I am beginning to understand why she values you." The attack came during the formal signing ceremony, the throne room filled with dignitaries, human colonial representatives, Valran nobility, diplomats from a dozen species witnessing what should have been historic alliance. Jacob monitored security feeds from Tactical Command. Celira was visible on one screen, positioned near her mother, wearing ceremonial armor. She looked composed, regal, but Jacob saw the tension in her shoulders. The East Wing alarms triggered first. Explosions echoed through the palace. Defensive teams responded as planned, reinforcing compromised sections while keeping reserves hidden. Second wave incoming, 3 minutes until they hit the throne room. All teams stand ready. The rebels breached throne room entrances from 2 directions. Energy weapons tore through ceremonial guards. Screams erupted as dignitaries scattered. The Empress remained on her throne, projecting absolute calm while chaos exploded around her. Celira moved instantly. Her blade sang as she engaged the first rebel through the eastern breach, movements fluid and lethal. 2 more rebels fell before they understood what had hit them. Jacob's unit deployed from concealed positions, catching rebels in crossfire between defensive layers. They pushed the eastern assault back, collapsing the rebel advance into a kill box. But the western breach was overwhelming Valoran defenders. Jacob saw it on the feeds. Too many rebels, too much firepower, defensive lines buckling. "Commander, western approach is failing. I'm taking my unit to reinforce." Vrask's voice crackled through the comm. "Negative, Lieutenant. Hold your position." "Your reserves are 3 minutes out. They'll be through in 2. I'm moving." Jacob didn't wait for approval. He signaled his team and ran, navigating palace corridors at a dead sprint. His ribs complained, still not fully healed, but pain was irrelevant. They hit the western approach from behind the rebel advance, catching them in a flanking maneuver that turned their assault into a fight on 2 fronts. The explosion threw Jacob sideways, slamming him into a wall hard enough to crack stone. His vision whited out, his rifle clattered away. He tasted blood and felt hands grabbing his armor, dragging him toward cover. Through the haze, he saw Celira. She'd left her post, abandoned protocol, come for him despite everything her position demanded. She fought like a force of nature, her blade carving through rebels with devastating efficiency. Her amber eyes blazed with protective fury. She reached him as his vision steadied. Her hand found his face, checking for injuries with desperate precision. "You are alive. Tell me you are alive." "Still breathing. You shouldn't be here. Your mother is protected by her guard. You are not." Her fingers trembled against his jaw. "I will not lose you to your damned need to sacrifice yourself." More rebels pushed through. They fought side by side, moving with instinctive coordination that transcended training. His tactical thinking complemented her physical prowess. When he identified threats, she eliminated them. When she committed to an attack, he covered her angles. In the chaos of combat, the boundaries between duty and desire dissolved entirely. They held the western approach until Vrask's reserves arrived. The rebels broke and scattered. Palace guards pursued, hunting down survivors with methodical efficiency. The throne room secured, the summit survived. The Empress stood before assembled dignitaries, declaring victory and commitment to the alliance both species had nearly lost. After the ceremony, the Empress summoned Jacob privately. He stood before her throne, exhausted and bleeding from minor wounds. "The life debt is satisfied. You have proven yourself in combat and council." She paused, something almost human entering her expression. "My daughter cares for you. This is evident to everyone. I am not convinced humans are our equals in strength or nobility, Lieutenant Torres, but I am convinced that you specifically have worth beyond your species. I offer you a position as liaison between human colonial forces and the Valoran military." Jacob processed the offer. It meant staying, meant building something permanent. It meant being near Celira without the artifice of life debt or political obligation. "I accept, Your Majesty." She nodded once, dismissing him. Celira found him in her private chambers an hour later. She'd cleaned up, changed into fitted dark clothing without the weight of armor. Her pink-purple hair fell loose around her shoulders. She looked tired and beautiful and real in a way that made his chest ache. "You left your post, came for me when you should have stayed with your mother." "Yes," she moved closer, closing the distance with deliberate steps. "I would do it again." "That's going to cause problems." "Let it." Her hand found his, fingers threading through his. "The life debt is satisfied, but I am not finished with you." Jacob turned to face her fully, seeing everything in her amber eyes, fear and desire, vulnerability and determination. "I stopped thinking of you as alien obligation weeks ago, started thinking of you as the person I want to wake up next to." "Then we should stop wasting time." Their first kiss was tender but uncertain as they navigated newness across species differences. Jacob's hands were gentle against her blue skin, learning the texture and temperature, the way her breath caught when he traced the curve of her jaw. Celira's fingers found the scars on his face, mapping the history written there with careful reverence. They explored each other slowly, discovering what touch meant across different biologies. Her skin was cooler than human but warmed under his hands. His stubble was rough against her smoothness, creating friction that made her shiver. They found their rhythm gradually, his mouth on her neck, her hands in his hair, both breathing harder as restraint gave way to need. When they finally came together, it felt like something the universe had conspired to create despite every logical reason it shouldn't work. They moved as they had in combat, instinctive, coordinated, completely attuned to each other. Jacob learned what made her gasp, what made her grip him harder, what made her speak his name in her own language with desperate urgency. Celira discovered human vulnerability and strength intertwined, the way he gave himself to her completely, trusting her with everything he was. Afterward, they lay tangled together, breathing synchronized, hearts gradually slowing. Jacob traced patterns on her blue skin, marveling at how natural this felt. Celira rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "I do not know what happens next," she said quietly. "The politics will be complicated. The court will have opinions. Yeah, probably going to be a mess." "Does that frighten you?" "Terrifies me." He pulled her closer, but not as much as the idea of losing you. Celira lifted her head to meet his eyes. "Then we face it together. No more running, no more assuming the worst." "Together," he agreed. She kissed him again, and in that moment, the future felt less like an obstacle and more like a promise worth fighting for.